Hey everybody, first and foremost, welcome. This will be the first installment of what will hopefully turn into a series of videos and podcasts from fantasy football's finest. We're a group of friends who have a great passion for not only fantasy, but the game of football itself. Most of us grew up playing football together, and we've been heavily dialed into fantasy football for 18 plus years now. More of who we are and what the series will become later, but I would like to start with the upcoming draft. Leading up to the draft, almost everybody is making mock drafts. I've always been well invested in professional football and feel that I have a pretty solid understanding of every team in the NFL. I wanted to make a mock draft where I put myself in the chair of the general manager of each team and give insights to what I believe to be the best option for those teams given their circumstances leading up to the first round on April 23rd. This is really the best part leading up to the draft. You're taking shots, you're focusing on younger players and trying to turn your team around for the future. Most people who make mocks focus solely on the player and their perceived value for that pick. I would like to dive a little bit further and give my thoughts on the team's actual needs based on scheme as opposed to perceived needs from other analysts. For this first video, I'll be focusing on the top 5 picks in the draft, what their biggest needs are, current roster and coaching staff, what teams should do with their pick, and what I believe will eventually be the outcome for that pick, not necessarily the team. Without further ado, let's start with the Cincinnati Bengals, who currently hold the first overall pick. So the Cincinnati Bengals hold the first overall draft pick. If you guys hear or see my dog in the background, I apologize. He's pretty riled up today. So the Bengals have the first overall draft pick, and a lot of people have been tying Joe Burrow to the team, which is understandable. I mean, the guy won the Heisman National Championship. He put up video game numbers from a quarterback standpoint. He's just a great player. The Bengals still have Andy Dalton on their roster, and I still believe him to be a good quarterback. When you look at their roster, they have a lot more holes that they need to fill, especially on the defensive line, linebacker. They basically re-signed a new secondary via free agency. They got Von Bell, Mackenzie Alexander, and Trey Waynes. So I believe their secondary to be pretty solid. They could use some help at linebacker, and their offensive line is just a mess. A.J. Green missed all of last year as well as some of their other receivers, so they get him back, and him and Andy Dalton have a pretty good rapport with each other. So, me being the Bengals, I think Chase Young fills a more pressing need. The Bengals, I'm sure a lot of people are going to want that first overall draft pick. A lot of people are going to reach for a quarterback, especially like Joe Burrow. But I really feel that Chase Young is definitely the one that should be picked here. Will he be picked first overall? Probably not, and it's going to be Joe Burrow. But that's just what I believe. Next, at number 2, we have the Redskins. Now, everyone has Chase Young going to the Redskins, which I really don't think, the Redskins need him. The Redskins are transitioning from a 3-4 defense to a 4-3 defense under Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio as a defensive coordinator. Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio both played as a linebacker in the NFL, and that is a glaring need for the Redskins. Taking Chase Young here just doesn't make any sense. You drafted Montez Sweat last year, and you still have Ryan Kerrigan, which were both outside linebackers, but they'll be transitioning both to defensive ends, putting their hands in the ground in the new scheme. You have Matt Ioannidis, Jonathan Allen, and Payne there as defensive linemen. They're going to have a great rotation on that defensive line. The only thing they're missing is a solid linebacker. They grabbed Thomas Davis in free agency, who knows the system really well. So they just need a solid middle linebacker. Now you have to understand that Ron Rivera, being a middle linebacker himself, he had Luke Kuechly for the last few years before he retired. So I really think that they go that route. I don't think they should reach for a linebacker at the number 2 spot, which is why I think that they'll eventually trade out. So you could see a team like the Giants, who need an edge rusher, moving up to this spot. Maybe even someone like the Panthers moving up here. Not really sure. But the Redskins have way too many holes on their offense. They have deficiencies at left guard, linebacker, like I stated, wide receiver. They don't have a real threat. You have a hole at tight end, and who knows what they're going to do at quarterback. You have Dwayne Haskins, who, yeah, he did okay there towards the end of the season last year. You still have Alex Smith. You signed Kyle Allen in the offseason, who will know the system that Ron Rivera will want to run. But the overall quarterback, I say that you trade out of this pick, you acquire more draft capital to fill a lot of more needs, and especially in transitioning from a 3-4 to a 4-3 defense, you're going to need guys who fit that scheme a little bit better. Next, the Lions. There's not much to talk about with the Lions that come down to this. My personal opinion, you signed Danny Shelton in the offseason, who's a good run stuffer. I think you pair him with a guy like Derek Brown at defensive tackle, and you have a great 1-2 punch, and teams are going to find it very hard to run against the Lions in this next season if you get a guy like that. They could trade down because maybe 3 may be a little high for Derek Brown. They may get some more picks. They need help at offensive line, especially in the right tackle position. They could use another safety and definitely a linebacker. But I feel the depth at linebacker and safety are pretty good in this year's draft, so they could come back around in a second and just grab those players while they take Derek Brown here. Next, you got the Giants, who they need a lot of work. Definitely an edge rusher, offensive tackle. Nate Solder doesn't seem to be the guy. They signed Cameron Fleming, who definitely not the guy. And they could still use a big threat, like a true number 1 at wide receiver. So the Giants could be one of these teams that move up, maybe to take a Chase Young. But I think they sit where they are. I think a guy like Isaiah Simmons is perfect for them. He can play outside on the edge. He can play inside as a linebacker, and he also helps you out in nickel downs as a safety or even a slot corner. Next up for the Miami Dolphins, this is really kind of step 1 of my rebuilding process for the Miami Dolphins. They have 3 first-round draft picks, and being honest, I don't think they should reach for a quarterback right here. A lot of people are calling for Tua or Justin Herbert, or maybe using those picks to move up to get Joe Burrow at number 1, but that's not what they should do. Dolphins need a lot of help, and coming from the Belichick tree, Flores knows the value of having a lot of draft picks and building your team through the draft. It helps you out as far as salary because you're getting guys on the cheap, and you have them under contract for 4 to 5 years, depending. And all these first rounders, by the way, get 5th round options. So that's going to be good for them to rebuild. So with the first pick for the Miami Dolphins in my step 1 of the rebuild, I have them taking Jedrick Wills, offensive tackle from Alabama. He's a great all-around tackle, and that offensive line is just bad. Dolphins have a lot of needs, including more on the offensive line, quarterback, obviously, wide receiver, and maybe some help at safety. But their cornerbacks are pretty well set. They signed Kyle Van Noy as a free agent. So I think they're looking pretty good with keeping their picks the way that they are. They shouldn't trade up. If anything, they could trade down, maybe acquire a couple more picks, but we'll just see what happens with them. But for right now, I like Jedrick Wills at tackle for the Dolphins. And that's pretty much going to sum up my top 5 right now. Again, you can see a lot of movement in the top 5. Teams getting desperate for taking a quarterback. Teams looking to move out of that position to get some more capital. I really like Isaiah Simmons going to the Redskins. I think that's a really good fit for them. He's got a great frame. I think he can put some added size on to really fill out as a middle linebacker. And he can also play outside as well. A nice versatile player for Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio to play around with. Derek Brown, I think it's a home run hit for the Lions. I think they should have that card filled out already and send it in. But next video, I'll be going through the next 5 picks of the draft, and hopefully I'll have more insight from the rest of my fantasy squad here, and we'll round out this first mock draft, get their insights on what they believe will happen, and we'll go from there. Thanks.